Okay, so welcome to the next session. So we've done all our creasing now, and we're going to be moving on to warm tones. So we're going to warm the kit up, bring in some of the red tones, just give her a little bit more newborn-esque skin. This is the tones I do before the mottling. It's very much like the beginning layers that we did with the washes and everything like that, but it's a little bit thicker, and it's with the lip blush and nail from Bountiful Baby. So we're going to need a lot of this paint, so I'm going to do 3, maybe 4 pipettes worth of thinner, so that's about 10 to 12 milliliter of paint. So that's 3, and we'll just do 1 more, like so. So we have a nice big batch. Should we do 1 more? We'll do 1 more, like so. A nice big batch. And then we use our lip brush and nail again, and our red brush. Just wet your brush and lift a good palette out of there, and mix that into your paint, like so. Make sure that you got it all mixed and there's no bits floating around in there. Give that a good mix. And I'm going to go back in and lift some more paint out of there, and mix that in again. So we want it a little bit thinner than the paint that we used for the creases, but we don't want it quite as thin as the wash layers that we were using before, because we really do want to leave quite a bit of paint on the vinyl and warm the vinyl up. So what we have here is quite nice. So you can see it still leaves a good portion of colour on the top when you push it to the side, but it's not too thin. It's not too thick either. It runs straight off the brush. It doesn't hold as much colour as the other layer for the creasing. So I think that's just about right. I'm also going to pop a little bit of blue into this because it's quite red. So not much at all, but far too much on the brush there. So just the tip of the brush, and just mix that in. And it just darkens the paint a little bit and just takes a little bit of that orange out that's in the Bountiful Baby premix. Okay, so what we want to do, very much like before, we want to take our what's this called, a mop brush here, the one with the big span like this, and take our vinyl piece that we would like to work on, and I'm going to start at the back of the head, just turn that around a bit, just to make sure that it's the correct consistency. So I'm just going to pull that right over, and yes, that is. So it holds, there's a bit of colour there, you can see it's red, but it's not leaving like massive streaks of red across the head. So I'm going to paint the whole of the head here, but there is some areas that I do not want you to touch. Okay, we go all, oh, just trying to turn this around, hold on, there we go. So all the way around, but I do not want you to put any paint on the lips yet. I'm going to come back to the lips later on. Okay, and just paint this around. There we go. Just paint around the vinyl. Like we did with the wash, you just want to cover the whole vinyl, including the ears, right into the ears, into the nose, eye creases. Try to turn the head, I don't want to touch the head, you see, when I do that. Just trying to turn the head around. Into the little ears, oh, got an eyelash there. Right, now we're going to go back with our sponge and we're just going to pounce out the excess. Again, very much like the wash layers that we did. And we're just going to pounce that all out, like so. All the way around the head. And like before, you'll know when you've gone over that section, because you will see it goes from being very, very shiny to having a slightly matte poor look on the head. You can see here it's very, very shiny, and here there is a matte poor look, but there's still a bit of shine there because it is wet, but it's not the luminous shine that you have when you haven't brought your sponge over it. So like with the wash layers, we're going to be pouncing our excess off of our sponge on the paper towel here, and then we'll continue back on with lifting the paint off the vinyl here, and you just keep going until you have all the sections done with your sponge all the way around the head. Turn it around. Again, we've stayed away from the lips here. We stay clear of those, or we will do those individually. Just bounce around the back of the ear. So now I'm going to get a dry sponge, not sponge, brush. Here, where's the red one we've been using here? And I'm just going to go through all the little creases like we did previously, and make sure that there's no excess lying in there. So all the little creases, you'll know where they all are by now, after the last layer. And then just go through all the little creases, make sure there's no excess paint. And I think we're all good. So we're just going to pounce the texture back in there, all over the head, and then that's the first layer done. And I'll leave that to the side, like so, and we're going to move on to the next part of the vinyl. So give your paint a good mix, like so. Now this time we want to go over the palm of the hand as well, because when we did the wash layers, the flesh layers even, we didn't go over the palm of the hand, but we are going to be doing it with the red. You want to go over the whole of the arm, like so. And you go over the palm of the hand and up all the way to the tips of the fingers. Don't forget the sides of the fingers as well. And then move to the front if we can. This is where it's very important not to touch the ring of the hand there. Ring of the top here. You want to hold on to the rim here, because otherwise you'll end up with a white ring around the outside here. So on the front of the hand, we're going to go over that as well, but we're not going to go on the nails. We're still staying away from the nails. That's another separate part of the painting process. So everywhere but the nails for this bit. Okay, I think we've got everywhere. So again, back with your sponge and pounce off the excess, and then pounce that onto your paper towel, like so. And just pounce that around. Pounce it off the palm of the hand. Just going to turn this around so we get to the front, and then pounce it off the front of the hand as well, or the top of the hand, and make sure there's nothing in the creases. So we're going to go over with our dry brush and just make sure that there's nothing in between the fingers or around the creases or something like that. Just especially on the palm of the hand. I think we're about done there. Just going to go back over with my sponge. Now you'll be able to see a big difference already just with the one layer. Okay, we've got quite a few of these layers ahead of us, so get comfy. But yes, that's the difference between one layer. So we've got probably about 4, maybe 5 of these layers to go to begin with, because Miracle's going to be quite red because she's meant to be a baby that's just been born. So I'm going to have a lot more red baby tones in her than the sort of 2 to 3 week old newborn. So I'm going to pop that hand down and move on to the next one. Just mix up my paints and paint them straight onto the vinyl. Make sure you cover the whole palm. And make sure you leave the nails alone, but you still do the tips of the fingers. Make sure you remember the sides of the fingers as well. And the palm of the hand. Like so. Okay, when you've got everywhere, oh, I missed the front here. When you've got everywhere with your paint, then back with your sponge and just pounce off the excess. Like so. Make sure you get all the way around the vinyl. And you have the palm of the hand as well. And then I'm going to go in with my dry brush and just make sure there's nothing between the fingers or in the wrist creases or the palm creases or anywhere like that. Should be able to see it, but you never know. Just run your brush through it and then just pounce over with your sponge. So that's another limb done. So pop that to the side in your safe zone. Okay. Okay, so now onto the leg. So mix your paints again and paint it right over the vinyl. Like so. And with this one we stay clear. With our washes, we stay clear of the sole of the foot, but with this one we're going to go over the sole of the foot as well. So over everything, and like with the fingernails, we don't want to go over the toenails at this point in time, because I paint them separately. So just bring your brush over there, but not touching the toenails. If you do get it on the toenails, then wipe it off with a sponge or a brush or something like that. Okay, so all the areas are covered with the paint mix, so I'm just going to go in with my sponge and just pounce that all off. All the way around, making sure to get into the little creases as much as you can. Make sure you're not leaving any excess on the vinyl. down on the sole of the foot. And the top of the foot as well. And then we're going to go back in with our dry brush even. I keep calling it a sponge. It's a brush. So just go in with your brush all over the little creases and everything like that. Like so. And just pounce the excess off. Like so. And then that's another part done. So lay that in your safe zone and move on to your other leg. I'm just going to move this to the other side so we have a bit more space to work over here. Okay, so mix your paint again and draw it over the vinyl, like so. Just paint right around the vinyl here, down onto the foot. Like so. And all around the toes and on the sole of the foot. And then just pounce all the excess off, like with the other leg. And then pounce the excess off onto your paper towel. And then onto your leg. Pounce all around the sole of the foot as well, on the sides, on the back of the leg. Make sure you've got all the little spots. Okay, then go back in with your dry brush. Just make sure there's nothing lurking in the creases. Like so. And then set that to the side. And we'll start with our belly plate. And let me just check, I think I've missed a little bit on the back here. And that's better. Okay. So, on our belly plate, we're going to do everything but the umbilical cord. Okay? If you don't have an umbilical cord, if you just got a belly button, then cover your belly button at this point. You want to do the whole of the vinyl, belly button included. Just lift it all the way around. You can already see the difference in colour there. It's quite astonishing. You'll be surprised how much the vinyl changes over the next few layers. Just bring that right around the belly button. So again, if you've got a belly button, not an umbilical cord, then you want to go right over it with your paint. If you've got an umbilical cord, then I would leave it for now. So we're just going to pounce off the excess. Like we've done previously. All around. So just pounce the excess off onto your paper towel. Make sure you get the sides of the vinyl as well, otherwise you'll end up sort of drips will accumulate. And make sure you've got everything all the way around, and then grab your dry brush and just make sure that there's nothing left in the creases, and then that's that layer done. So I'm going to pop the Q-tips up to keep her nose open in, and then I'm going to pop her in the oven for 130 at 130 degrees Celsius and for 108 minutes. And then I'm going to come back when she's cooled and we'll apply another layer. Okay, so she's cooled down now. I've set her paint and she's cool. So we're ready to go with the next layer of red. So even though it looked very, very red when you put it on, you can see there's very little change because the paint is so thin. It's going to take quite a few layers to build this up. So we're going to go ahead and put a second red layer on. So same paint, just painting over the same way. So everywhere bar the lips. You do not want to paint the lips yet. So make sure you line the lips well and there isn't like a white line on the outside of them. If you need to use a round brush rather than a fan brush to get that nice even line around the lips, then feel free. Just paint the red all over her vinyl. Like so. Now please bear in mind as we are building these red layers up, I am very, very pale, so my colouring is very similar to her original vinyl colouring, so don't compare her skin tone with mine and think, oh gosh, she's so unbelievably red, because when you see her in person she really won't be. It's just I'm very, very ghostly pale, so it can be a little bit difficult at times because, you know, I'm struggling to find a nice natural colour when I'm so unbelievably pale. But try not to compare her to my skin tones, because I am a lot paler than most people. Okay, so just pouncing out all the excess paint on her vinyl, making sure to remember behind her ears and around the back of the head. So I think I've got everywhere with the sponge, so I'm going to go with my dry brush again and just go through all the little creases, make sure there's no paint hiding, waiting to cause us problems. And that's especially in the ears because we can't get our sponge in there, so in the ears and behind the ears. Okay. And just go back over with our sponge just to re-add the texture in. And that's another layer done on her head. So I'm going to pop that to the side and we're going to move on to the arm. Okay, so mix your paints and pop that all over her arms. A little bit too much there because you see how it ran immediately around the vinyl, so you just want to be a little less paint on there. So again we're going to go over the palm and over the fingers and over the front of the hand and the fingers, but we're leaving the nails alone for now. Now I'm actually going to use the same brush I used for the creasing, and I'm just going to use it to go over the tips of the fingers here. See what we're doing here, just going over the tips because I can't get my brush in carefully enough when using the fan brush, so I'm just going to bring something that's got a little bit more finesse and it's easier to control. So I'm just edging around the nails, so it's only the nails that don't have any thinner paint mix even on. So I'm just going to pounce everything off now. So all around the vinyl. Like so. Make sure you get every little bit of it, of the excess off. And up. Careful around the nails that you don't pounce some paint onto them. If you do, just grab a dry sponge or edge of a baby wipe or a dry brush or something and just wipe it off. It's not too much of a problem. You just don't want to set it there. Okay, so I think I've got everything there, so I'm coming back in with my dry brush and just making sure there's no paint in any creases, especially between the fingers. Okay, and then going back over with my sponge and just pouncing that all out. Okay, that's the arm done, so we're going to move on to the next arm now. Okay, so I've just started putting the paint on the second limb, second arm, and remembering to go over the palm of the arm, the hand as well. In between the fingers, and then using my creasing brush I'm just going to go around the tips of the fingers, make sure we've got everything. Not forgetting the thumb, and then we're going to pounce all the excess off. Like so. Okay, I think I've got everything with my sponge. I'm going to go back in with my brush around all the little creases, in between the fingers, in between the elbow, and then just pop back over with my sponge just to add that texture back in, and that's the second arm done. So we're going to move on to the leg now. So with the leg, same as before, mix up your paint, add it onto the vinyl, all the way around, and down the leg here, like so, and again missing the toenails out. So we're going over the toes but missing the nails. And not forgetting the palm of the foot. And then I'm going to use my creasing brush just to get the tips of the toes and all around the toenails that I haven't been able to get with my fan brush. Okay, now I've got the whole vinyl covered, I'm just going to go in with my sponge and pounce off all the excess, like so. turn the vinyl around so I can get to underneath. And just pounce all around. Changing that super shine into a matte look. And then moving on to the foot and the sole of the foot. Okay, and going in with our dry brush, just make sure there's nothing left in the creases, especially between those little toes and around the ankle area. And then just go back in with your sponge and just add that texture back in so you don't have brush marks everywhere. And that's the leg done. And then moving on to the other leg, give the paint a good mix and then come back onto the vinyl with that. And so on, so forth. So you want to put that all the way around the vinyl. All the way around. Missing out the toenails, but going over the toes. Not forgetting the palm of the foot. And then pick up your creasing brush and just go around the tips of the toes where you weren't able to get with your fan brush. We're not missing anything out. Okay, and now we've got that covered, we go back in with our sponge and just pounce off all the excess. You know the drill. Now because we're pouncing it off with a sponge, it's not going to be one base colour. Because of the technique we're using and the fact that it's such thin paint and there's going to be so many layers, this will add a lot of translucency to the vinyl, and it's not going to be one whole the same tone. There will be ever so slight changes in the tone throughout the vinyl. So this will act as a base mottle as well. So it's not going to be what I call the cherry bottom mottle, where you have the little circle specks around, which is created by using this sponge. But you'll have a base, very open mottle, and sort of changing tones throughout the limb, which will give you a nice background before we go in with the mottling. Okay, I think found that this works very, very well. So again, lots of experimenting has brought me to where I am, so don't be afraid to go outside of the box. Don't be afraid to use new colours and new techniques, and just play around with all of your items that you have. I've done that. I've failed several times and it's looked awful, but I've learned from that, and it's brought me away from the direction I was going and pushed me into a new direction, and find that direction it's pushed me into is actually a really good way to do it. So don't be afraid to go outside the box. This is just the way I reborn. Okay, it may not totally be for you. You'll pick bits up from my tutorial that will work absolutely perfectly for you, and who knows, it might all work really well for you. But don't be afraid, if you don't like something, to change it up a little bit. Ask me questions. I mean, no question's a silly question, no matter how simple it may sound to you. We've all asked the question at one point, so feel free to ask me, and I will do my best to answer any questions you have. You know, so it's up to you, and just play around and have fun, because it's an art form. It's good fun, it's individual, and it's all about what you like and your little tricks of the trade, and just playing and having fun. So don't be afraid to look outside of the box. Okay, so I'm just pouncing off like I did before with the other limbs, all around, like so. There we go. Now you can really see the difference between the umbilical cord, which we haven't touched apart from putting one little vein in it, compared to how the vinyl's looking now. It's quite difficult to see because the light is shining off the thinner that's on there, but once she's cooled I will show you, before we put the next layer on, just how much difference 2 layers of red has made to her vinyl. Okay, so we're just going to brush away any excess and then put the texture back in. Okie dokie, so that's the second red layer finished now, so I'm going to go ahead and set her in the oven for at 130 degrees Celsius for 8 minutes, and I will come back when she is cooled. Don't forget to put the little Q-tips up her nose to keep it from closing again. I've done that before and I've had to reopen the nose later on, which I've ended up ruining the paint by doing it. So make sure you put your little Q-tips up her nose, as cruel as it sounds, because they are very, very important. I've learnt that the hard way. Okay, so I will see you once she is cooled down. Okay, so she's all cooled down now and she's ready for her next layer. So we're going to go ahead and do exactly the same with our red paints. Now I've run out a little bit, so I'm just going to remix some more. So I'm probably going to put another 3, maybe 4 pipettes in here of thinner. This is where you use a lot of thinner in these layers. Okay, so just tidy up a bit. You want your lip, blush and nail colour, so just take a couple of brushfuls of your paint and just mix it into your pot here. Again, you want it thicker, a little bit thicker than the washes we did at the beginning, but thinner than the crease paint that we used previously. Do one more brush load and then that'll be more than enough. And I feel that's a little bit too thick, so I'm just going to add another pipette of thinner. And just a little bit more. And mix that up. There. Okay, so moving on. So same as before, just mix all over the vinyl. Now there seems to be some kind of little red dots coming from this, so I'm just going to change brushes because I think it has something to do with the brush. So let's see if I can find another brush that's another fan brush and see if that's any different. Yeah, that's a little bit better. So I'm just going to go ahead and cover the whole head in this layer, just like we did before, and we're not going to be going near the lips. Okay, so leave the lips alone and cover the rest of your head, not forgetting the ears. need to use another brush to go around the lips without leaving any sort of white space around them, so you want a little bit more control. Now with this layer it's going to be the last layer that I cover the nose with. So next layer we're not going to cover the nose. Okay, so I'm just going to pounce out the excess. I'll show you why we're not going to cover the nose the next time. I'll explain it all then. So I'm just going to pounce out all the excess I can find. Just have a good look around the vinyl, make sure you've got all the little nooks and crannies and everything. And then go back in with your dry brush and just go through all the little creases. Make sure there's nothing hiding. I'm going to show you why we go back over with the sponge, because when you pull your brush through there you can see it leaves brush marks on the head. I'm not sure whether the camera will pick it up, but it does change the texture, so I'm just going to go back over and pounce and bring in the skin texture that the pores, that the sponge brings in because of the pores. Okay. It's just a lot smoother, a lot cleaner and a lot nicer than having lots and lots of brush strokes all over the head. Oh, flying sponge. Okay. Just check below here that there's nothing in the creases. Okay, I think we're just about there. Now you're really beginning to see the colour change in the vinyl because we haven't done anything on the lips yet, so they're beginning to look very, very pale compared to our head. So we're on the right track, we're almost there. We're going to do a couple more layers, probably another 3, maybe 4 layers of this. We'll see how we go. Okay, I'm going to change it up a bit and do the belly plate. I'm just going to put that brush to the side because we don't need that one. Okay. So all the way around the belly plate apart from the umbilical cord. If you just have a belly button, then go over your belly button with your paint. Treat it like the rest of the tummy, but we don't want to be touching the umbilical cord, okay? So just painting over the whole vinyl, making sure you don't have too much on your brush because you want to be able to control it. So you don't want any drips going anywhere, so just right around there. Make sure I've gone underneath there. And then we're going to pounce this out, okay? This is the part of the reborning that you can really begin to see the baby come to life. As you add more and more layers and warm the skin tone up, you can really begin to see the personality coming through. So this is probably one of my favourite parts because you really begin to see your creation begin to come to life at this point. So yeah, definitely one of my favourites. Okay, move on to the next one. So just going to move this foot out of the way because I keep hitting it a bit too close. Okay, so I'm just going to paint over the vinyl. Same thing as we've been doing. Again, over the fingers, right down to the tips, but don't paint the nails. That's later. That's for later on. Okay. And just paint over all the excess here, like so. And then over the palm of the hand as well, right up to the tips of the fingers, all the way up, not forgetting the sides of the fingers as well. And then I'm going to go in with my crease brush and just make sure that I've got all the little bits around the nails. And then I'm just going to pounce the excess off. Make sure you've got all the little nooks and crannies, and then get in with your dry brush around all the little creases that are holding any excess paint. And then go back in with your sponge and just make sure there's no brush marks. Okay, and put that in your safe zone. Move on to the next one. Just going to move this out of the way because I don't want that near us at the moment. Okay, so next layer. Just pounce all of that through. Again, nice gentle, firm but gentle pouncing. So you're not pushing really far down, but you're not, it's not like a little tap. You need the whole area of the sponge to sit on the vinyl. So if you see how I'm pushing down there, that's about the pressure that I'm putting on when pouncing quickly. Okay, if you don't feel, go at your own speed. If the way I'm pouncing is too fast for you, then don't feel that's a bad thing. You want to just slow down and take it at your own speed. Everybody's different. Everybody has different sort of strengths and weaknesses, so just go at your own speed and find what works for you, okay? Especially if you're just beginning and you haven't quite got the handle on the technique yet. I was like that when I first started. I was very, very slow at doing things, and that was 100% fine, absolutely. Okay, there's absolutely no shame in going a little bit slow. So just going to go in with my brush now, make sure there's no excess. I think I've already done this, but just do it again, and then pounce off any brush marks. Okay, onto the leg. Just pop that onto the side. Mix up my paints again and apply it to the vinyl. Now with all that crease work we did earlier, now when adding this, you're already getting a really translucent look because of the crease work we've done earlier. It really helps in that department. It just makes it look that little bit more realistic and a little bit more translucent. So all the hard work we've put in is beginning to pay off now. Okay, just make sure you've got everywhere. Again, leave the toenails, but you want to be painting the toes. Okay, like so, and bring around the other side, and then off we go pouncing again. Okay, all around. So doing these layers upon layers and pouncing them off with a sponge will give you a nice subtle blotchy tone that newborns have without having to do layers and layers and layers of mottling. So this just builds up the colour and gives you a nice texture to the skin. Maybe texture is the wrong word. A nice, I don't know what the word is, but like texture. It's a nice look to the skin. Because if you were just doing mottling layers and everything to build up the colour, you won't get the same warmth to the vinyl, and it could end up looking a little bit messy. That's what I found when I just tried to do all the layers as mottling layers. I found that I couldn't get the right consistency all the time, and I ended up having a very, very messy piece of vinyl. That's not to say it doesn't work for other people. I do know a few people who build the colour up through mottling layers. Again, it's all up to what you feel works best for you. For me, that did not work, okay? So it's just sort of finding your feet and finding the way that works best for you. It's just a good example of how different people can be. Okay. And we're just pouncing through there. And again, I'm just going to pick up my dry sponge that's beginning to become not so dry, so I might have to switch my brush out. So I'm just going to pounce through all the little areas where any paint could build up. So it's usually around the toes, around the ankle and behind the knee. So I'll just go back in with my sponge and just re-add the texture in. Okay, and that's that leg done. So pop that to the side. I'm just going to put this one in. So pop it in your safe zone and move on to the other leg. So mix up your paints and see how that ran right round the vinyl there. There was a little bit too much on my brush, so I couldn't control where that was going. So a little bit less on my brush next time. Again, right up to the edges of the toes, but not on the toenails. Don't forget the sole of the foot as well. And I'm going to use my crease brush, which I realise I didn't do on the other one, but I think I got everywhere. But I'm going to use my crease brush just to go around the edges of the toes and make sure that they all have paint right around them, and the tips and everything, and that one into the base of the nail there. So I'm just going to dry my brush off and lift the excess out so we don't have any problems there. Okay, now for the pouncing. So I'm just going to pounce all around the vinyl, same as ever. Out all the excess around here. Okay, so she's all cooled down now, so she's ready for her next layer. So we're going to do another red layer, exactly the same as we've been doing before. Probably got about 3-4 more layers of this to go, and then we'll start working on her lips. So just brush right over the head, you know the drill by now. Just adding colour, like so. And all the way around. lips just yet, that's the next stage. So just paint all the way around, don't forget her ears and the back of her head, and then up over the top, like so. Okay, we've filled everywhere in now, so I'm going to go back over with our sponge and just pounce everything off. See, we're really beginning to get the nice colours now. It's really beginning to blossom. Because you won't see anything and you'll think, oh, it's not doing anything, and then suddenly, over a couple of layers, it will just darken up and start to really, really look wonderful. And it'll just happen really, really suddenly. And you'll start to see the progress you're making. If you ever get a little bit disheartened, if you take pictures right at the very beginning or something like that, and just have a look, or take pictures at each stage, and just have a look back whenever you get a bit, oh, I've not done anything, it's not, you know, I'm not making any progress. And if you just look at those first photographs, you'll see that you have come a really, really long way in reborning the kit. There's been several times where I've been like, I don't understand, I've been doing so many layers, we're up to about 15 layers now and nothing's happening. But then I'll look at the picture that I took before I start, because I usually take a picture before I start, and I really see a massive difference between the two. So if you ever feel a bit disheartened, just go back and have a little look, and you'll be right as rain again and ready to start. Keep going. Especially when you come to these layers really do change the vinyl quite a lot. Okay, so going back in with my dry brush, just in all the little creases, just make sure that there's no excess paint and all the little gaps are filled, like so, especially in the ears. And then just pounce out any brush marks, like so. And then that's the head done. So we'll move on to the next one now. Okay, so you see the head's done there. So we'll move on to the arm. Again, a lot of reborning is just repeating certain layers, and or at least the way that I do it is, and you just got to be very, very patient when you do it, because it can feel like doing the same thing over and over again, but if you're patient with it, it is so worth it in the end, because the art that you create is just, you know, amazing. It still astounds me to this day, 6 years on, of how real these doll kits can look. You know, well, beforehand anyway, the sculptors do an amazing job, but when you start putting paint on them, it really does still, you know, make me go wow. You know, just watching them come to life in my hands is just, you know, it's amazing. Again, we're just pouncing off the excess here. Like so. Just pounce around the vinyl. Okay, go back in with your dry brush to make sure there's nothing in any of the creases. Okay, and just a little bit at the back here, around the fingers. Okie dokie. So that's the arm done. Move along to the other one. Okay, and then back with your sponge and just pounce off the excess. So go back in with your dry brush and just make sure there's nothing in the creases or any excess paint lying around. Just make sure that it's all cleared out. Okay. Just get rid of all the marks that the brush marks that have been left. Just retexture that, and that's the second arm done. So we'll move on to the leg now. Running low on paint, so I'll have to mix some more in a bit. You see that this really does take a lot of paint to do. You've got a lot of surface area to cover so many times as well. So this is where you use most of your thinners. Then just pounce off the excess. Okay, then go in with your dry brush into all the little creases that have excess paint hanging around. Okay, then go back over your sponge to put the pull-up texture back in, like so. And yeah, I think that's that foot done. So we're going to move on to the next foot, or leg even. And place the thinner right over it. Like so. Again, not going on the nails but around the nails. If you get a little on, that's okay, you just wipe it off with your sponge. So pants out all the excess. Okay, then go in with your dry brush. Just make sure there's no excess lying in all the little creases. Then go back in with your sponge and just pounce out all the brush strokes that are on the vinyl now. And that's the other leg done. And we'll move on to the belly plate now. And same thing again, leave the umbilical cord. If you've just got a belly button, then you want to be painting over the belly button. All the way across. Like so. And then just pants out any excess. All the way around. Like so. And then grab your dry brush and just go through all the little creases and make sure that there's no excess paint lurking. Like so. And then just pants out all the brush marks you've just created, and that's your belly plate done. So I'm going to set her in the oven for 8 minutes at 130 degrees Celsius, and I will come back once she is all cooled down so we can put the next couple of layers on her. Okay, So back with the head. In fact, before I do, you can just see here now that now that she has all of her, we're beginning to build up the colours. You can see what I mean about the blotchiness that these layers create. Because of the pouncing with the sponge, it begins to give the skin a little red blotchiness that newborns have, like so. So you're not having to build up with lots and lots of mottling layers. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do another layer now. So same thing, mix your paints up and pop them over the head. Leave the nose alone and leave the lips alone, but everywhere else is fair game. So everywhere, I'm going to paint everywhere else all over the head, like so. All the way around. So right around the back of the head, don't forget the backs of the ears as well. Right, up and over, make sure you've got all the little bits. We've got everywhere now, so we're going to just pounce all of that out with our sponge. Okay. Right, so just going to bring in my dry brush again. Make sure it's in all the little nooks and crannies that you want it to be, and make sure there's no excess lying around. Okey-dokey. And then just pounce over the areas you've just gone over with your brush. Okey-dokey. Righty-ho. I think that's about right. Okay, so I'm just going to pop her down over here in my safe zone. Okay, and we're going to move on to the rest. So we're going to go on to the first arm now. Same old, so just mix your paint and pop it on the vinyl. Like so. Okay. And then again, pounce off the excess. All around. And the palms of the hands as well. And then it's a case of getting your dry brush out and just make sure that there's no excess lying in the little creases around here. And in between the fingers. Okay, and then just pounce over the areas you've just been with your brush. Like so. And then that's your first arm done. And we'll move on to the next arm. All over the arm there. Mixing your paints first. And just bring it right around. Right up to the fingernails. around them, but not on the fingernails. Not forgetting the little thumb. Up over the palm of the hand, like so. And once you've got everywhere covered, just go in with your sponge and pounce off the excess again. Okay, and then just go in with your dry brush again and make sure there's no excess lying around. Same as before. Okay. And then everywhere you've just been with your brush, just go back over with your sponge. Like so, and that's the second arm done. Pop that in your safe zone and move on to your leg. Give your paints a little bit of a mix and then just pop that on the vinyl. Like so. All around. Down over the foot. Again over the toes, but not on the toenails. Don't forget to go a bit in between the toes if they're separate. Okay, and then pounce off all the excess. Okay, once you've pounced out all the areas, again with your your dry brush even, just go around all the little areas that catch the paint and just brush it all out. And then just go over once more with your sponge. And that's your leg done. So moving over to the next leg now. Same thing, mix your paints, pop it over your vinyl and brush it right around. Like so. All the way around. Again, try and leave the nails untouched. Go right over the sole of the foot and just pounce off the excess. Just pounce off the excess that is gathered in the creases with your brush, especially around those toes and the ankle area, and just go over that with your sponge, and that's your foot done. And then last piece, we're going to go onto the vinyl with your paint, like so. Again, leaving the umbilical cord free. If you've just got a belly button there, then go over the belly button like you do with the rest of the vinyl. Right over here, like so. Okay, and then just pounce out the excess. Okie dokie. And once you've got that all pounced off, you're going to go in with your dry brush over the creases that the paint usually sits in. like so, and then just go over that again with your sponge, like that. And then we have another completed piece of vinyl. So I'm going to set that paint, and we're going to do that at 130 degrees Celsius for 8 minutes, and I will come back once she is dry and we'll decide whether we're going to do another layer or whether or not we're going to move on. So I'll come back after she's cooled down. Okay, so she's all cooled down now. We've set a paint, and I've decided that we're going to leave this stage for now. So we've got enough, I think we've got enough layers on here that for her to look quite nice. She's got a nice pink tone to her. She's getting the blotchiness and everything like that. So we're going to leave it for now. We will most probably come back to it later on. But for now that's enough done. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to show you, because she's getting quite pink now, I'm just going to tone it down a little bit like we do with neutralizing. So the opposite of the red is the blue, so I'm going to the bluey sort of green colours. So I'm going to put a bluey green wash on her now, just to kind of tone down the reds that we've got at the minute. It'll help give us some depth as well. So we're going to pop our red ramekin out the way, and we're going to move in with the blue. So I'm going to switch it up a bit and just get rid of all these brushes and move in with the blue brush. Okay, so we have our blue brushes here. I'm just picking up all the blue ones. Right, so we have the blue brushes, the blue sponge, and a ramekin, a clean ramekin. So we're going to use about two pipettes of thinner here. Might just go 2.5. And we're going to use our vein blue from Bountiful Baby, and we're going to take a brush load of that into the ramekin. Now we're going to keep this nice and thin like a wash, so I'm only going to put one brush load in there. Now because we want it blue and green, because she's sort of an orangey red at the minute, I'm just going to add a tad of yellow into the ramekin just to give it a little bit of green. So it's more a turquoise colour than a blue colour, as you can see here. More turquoise than blue. So mix that in, pop the lids on your paint and put them out into the paint stash, and then come back with your head, and then this is going to go everywhere but the lips again. Okay, so right over the whole head. You want this nice and thin, otherwise you'll end up looking dirty. So this is a good consistency here. Oops, far too much on my brush there, it's gone everywhere. Okay, and we're going to go over the nose with this as well. But we're going to leave the lips alone. Everywhere but the lips. Including the ears. And come up over the back of the head here. Around the back of the neck. Use a little bit more of my brush. Okay. Make sure we've got everywhere covered. When we have, like we have been doing with the red, is just pouncing out with the blue sponge. Like so. On the back of the head. Okay, now I've pounced everything out, I'm going to go in with my brush, my dry brush, same as before, and just make sure that there's no excess lying around, and that it's in all the little nooks that we want it to be in. Okay, And then we'll go back with our sponge and just pounce that all out again. Okay, and then that's that all done, and you can see how much that's toned that down already. It's a big tone down. So we're going to pop her over to the side. Just make sure. Okay, and then we're going to do the same thing for the arms as we did with the head. So just over everything, including the palm of the hand. All around the back, up and over. And this is just cooling down the reds so they come into more of the pinks. And up to the nails, but not on the nails. Okay, like so, not forgetting in between the fingers. And then we'll pounce that all off. All the way around. You do not want to miss anything with the blue. The blue is a very concentrated paint, so if you get it on the vinyl at some place, or it holds to the vinyl very well, so you need to be careful, because if you get a smudge of blue or you miss like a little area of blue, it's quite difficult to get off, and it makes the vinyl look dirty, so you just have to be extra vigilant when you're using blues. So we're going to go through again with the brush, just make sure there's nothing left in the creases, like so. I think that's about right. Just going to go back over with my sponge. And then that's your arm done. And we're going to move on to the next arm now. Do exactly the same thing. And just all the way over the vinyl. Like so. Right up to the nails, but not on the nails. In between the fingers. Forgetting your thumb, and the palm of the hand right up to the fingertips, like so. And then once it's all covered, pounce it off with your sponge. And then once you've got everything, go in with your dry brush into all the little creases and everything where the paint will stick, and just brush it all out, and then pounce that all off again. That's right, and that's the next piece of vinyl done. And then we're going to move on to the legs. So same thing again, once you've mixed your paint, and up and in with your blues, straight onto the vinyl, and pounce it all around the leg. Find the blue gives it a lovely translucent look, providing you use it sparingly. It can look translucent, but if you go too far it can look dirty, so you have to be very careful with how much blue you use. It can be your favourite colour, but it can also be your worst enemy as well, so you've just got to not overuse it. You need to find that balance, so don't be afraid to use blue, because it is magical. It really does help with the translucency, but you also don't want to overuse it, so you just got to play around. Get a test piece if you like, a test piece of vinyl, and play around on that. That's how I learnt how to use the blues. And I've painted one baby, like one particular kit, and it was just, I went a little bit overboard on my blues. So I thought, okay, I'm going to be more confident with my blues, and I just went a little bit too far, and she then ended up looking very, very dirty, so I had to strip her all the way back again, because I just wasn't happy. So it made me learn how much I can get away with the blue, but it made me learn the hard way. So if you're going to play around, I'd suggest you do it on a test piece of vinyl first, and then on your kit, so you don't ruin the whole kit and have to strip it all back again. Okay, so I've pounced all that off, and I'm just going to go back in with my brush, make sure there's nothing sitting around waiting to cause havoc. There we go, and just pounce off the excess, not the excess, the brush strokes there. And then we have another piece of vinyl done with the blue. So I'm going to sit that in my clean area and move on to the next leg. And just, again, same thing, brush the blue right across the vinyl, all the way around and down. This will also help bring up the veins, because through all those red layers you'll have lost a little bit of the definition of the veins, which is a good thing in some respects, because it pushes them down below the surface of the paint. It makes it look like they're below the surface even more. So this blue will just help highlight them a little bit and just bring them back to the foreground just ever so slightly. It's almost imperceptible, but it's definitely there. Just pounce all the excess off here. So this has multiple functions, this layer. It also helps darken the red as well. Just brings a lot more depth to it. So the blue is for depth, translucency, and bringing the veins ever so slightly forward, all the while neutralising some of the extra red tones that we've just put on the vinyl. So lots and lots of uses for this layer. So just pouncing around with my dry brush to make sure there's no excess paint, and then pounce off again with my sponge, like so, all the way around, and then that's your second leg finished. Okay, and then we're going to move on to the vinyl, the belly plate even, and we're going to go all the way over the belly plate now. I'm going to leave that umbilical cord alone still. But like I said before, if you have just a belly button here, then you can go over that with this blue as well. So right over the plate, and then just pounce off the excess there. If you see any little bits of fluff on the vinyl, then just pick them up before you set the paints, because once you set the paints it could hold it there and you're not able to get it off, especially if you're using mediums. So if you see anything, just pick it off while you're able to correct the paint. Gosh, that just won't go away, will it? There we are. And just paint all the way around. Okay, I think we're just about there with that. And then we'll just go around with our dry brush and make sure there's no excess lying around in the creases. And then go back over with your sponge just to make sure there's no brush strokes, and then that is your first blue layer done. So I'm going to heat set this at 130 degrees for 8 minutes, and we're going to come back and we'll decide then whether or not she needs another blue layer or whether we'll move on to the next tone. Okay, so I've set her paint now and she's nice and cool. So having a little look at her, now the paint's all dry, I don't think she needs another blue layer at the moment, but what I do think she needs is a little warm sort of sienna yellow layer. So I'm going to show you how I make that, and I'll put that on her now. We'll do one of those, maybe two. Again, we just see how it goes and how well the vinyl takes it. So we're going to put some thinner in here, again about 2 pipettes. So I'll put 2 and a little bit of pipettes, and then we're going to use our yellow and our lip blush and nail. So we're going to start with the yellow because that's going to be the main colour here. So take a brush full of yellow, just got a little bit of thinner in there, and mix that up into your palette. Can you see how bright this colour is? It's very, very bright, so just give it a good mix in there. It's almost neon-esque. So I'm wanting a little bit of a sienna here, so I'm going to use my lip blush and nail and take about half one side of a brush of the red, and I'm going to mix that into my palette here to make this sort of orangey warm colour. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and make that a little bit thicker, so more yellow in there, like so, and then a tad more red, not much, just a tad, like so, to make it back into that orangey colour. Right, and then looking at that, I'm actually going to add a little bit of the Flesh 07 in there as well. So I'm going to take half a brush of the Flesh 07 and I'm going to pop that into the ramekin as well. You're not really going to see too much of a change, but it just gives it a little bit more of an opaque look and just cools it down a little bit. So you have a nice tone there. You can see the consistency. It's nice and thin, like the blue layer, like a wash. Don't want it too thin though, otherwise it will make very little difference, but we don't want it too thick that it's going to leave yellow blotches all over his skin. So I'm going to put all my paints away now because we don't want any accidents happening. Okay, so for this I have my yellow sponge and my yellow/red fan brush. So I'm just going to go in and mix up my paints again, and then I'm going to pop that over her head like we did with the other colours, all the way over, including her nose, but again leaving the lips, that's the next stage. So just pop that all over her skin, all the way around. And this just brings a little vibrancy to the skin. No matter what skin tone you have, you'll always have yellow in that tone. So this is a very important colour. It just warms the vinyl because we just cooled it down to get rid of the red tones, the bright red tones, just tone them down a little bit. So the vinyl's now more on the colder spectrum, or colour spectrum. So this yellow just warms the vinyl up ever so slightly, gives her a little radiant glow. So providing you don't do too much, this is a fantastic colour to put over the top, just to bring out a little bit more life. So just put that all over her like so, and we're just going to pounce out the excess now. So with my sponges, I like to make sure that they are all have their own colour. So this one's yellow, so I'll use anything that I use yellow as the predominant colour in the mix. I'll use this sponge to sort of pounce and everything like that, and any of my other yellow sponges. But if the so I have different colours. So I have the yellow sponges, I have the red sponges, the blue and the flesh tone sponges. So the red ones are anything that warms the vinyl up with red in it, you know, the red tones, the mottling tones, the blushing, anything with red, you know, creasing as well. That will go under the red sponges. With the blues, it's the veining and the blue tones and the blue washes and anything with sort of bluey greeny sort of colder end of the spectrum colours will go under that sponge range. Any of the yellows, anything with yellow as a predominant colour will obviously go under the yellow, and then anything in the flesh tones, so anything where I use the flesh or the white as a predominant colour, will be under the flesh tone sponges. So you know, it's a good way to keep everything fresh and you don't mix any of the colours up, because if you start mixing the colours up, you'll end up with a quite dirty vinyl and you might end up being counterproductive and just counteracting what you're trying to, you know, get, like, counteract the tones of. So say you put a blue layer down, now we're putting a yellow down. If I use the blue sponge to do the yellow, then there's no point in doing the yellow because you're just putting more blue on top. So there's science in the madness. You definitely want to keep your sponges and your brushes separate. It just gives it a nice fresh look to the vinyl and it's nice and tidy on your workspace as well. So I'm going to move on to the hand now. Same as before, I'm going to go everywhere but the nails. All around. Like so. Up to the nails but not on the nails. Up the fingertips and around. Just make sure you've got everywhere covered on the vinyl. And then start to pounce out the excess. Okay, so with the brush I'm just going to pounce all around the excess, where the excess paint gathers, so in between the fingers, around the wrist and in the arm crease there. So just pounce any of the brush marks off and then set that to dry. Okay, so moving on to the next arm. Do exactly the same thing and just paint over all the vinyl, all the way around. Like so. Over the palm of the hand as well. Okay, now I've got all of that, I'm going to pounce off all the excess. Okay, now we're going in with our brush, our dry brush, into all the creases where the paint collects. We're just taking it out of there. Not too much this time, and just pounce off all the brush strokes, and then that's your next piece done. So I'm going to move on to the leg now. So we're just going to mix our paint and pop it on the vinyl like so, all the way around. You know the drill by now. Keep going. Be generous with how much you put on, but you don't want it running around the vinyl. So again, it's just about finding that balance. Okay, I'm just going to use my brush here just to go around the edges of the toes because I haven't quite got them all with the fan brush. Okay, and now we're going to pounce off the excess. And then just take your brush and just go into all the little creases again. and then back over with your sponge, and that's your leg done. Okay, so I'm going to switch that over for the next leg. Okay, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing, so mix your paint up and pop that over the vinyl, like so. All the way around. And up by the toes, by the nails, don't go on the nails. And all the way around. And just pounce off the excess. Okay, and then bring in your dry brush. Just pounce around the toes and the ankle and behind the knee, and then just go that over again with your sponge, just removing any of the brush marks, and that's your other leg done. So now we're going to move on to our belly plate. We're going to do exactly the same thing. Just go right over it like so. All the way around, just really warms the vinyl up. Now, because umbilical cords have a slightly yellow tinge to them when they're first born, just before they're cut or just after they're cut, so they're blue to begin with because it still has blood pumping through them, but about 15 minutes after birth or whenever the cord's clamped, the blood, it stopped pulsing and the blood has finished going through it, so it begins to get a yellow tinge to it as the blue tinge comes away. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to go over the umbilical cord with this yellow, because the cord will have been cut to be like this, so I'm going to put a clamp on the end of it when we finish, so it will have the yellow tinge to it. So we're just going to go over it with that, like so, and just pounce off the excess like we've been doing before. And we're just going to go in with our brush again, just through all the little creases and around the umbilical cord, and then we're just going to use our sponge to pounce off any brush strokes we've left. And then that's your yellow layer done. Now, I don't think she's going to need a second yellow layer. I think that's done just a perfect job. You can see this is sort of a lot drier, so you can see how that's really brought the tones warmer. So I warmed up the tones, and I don't think she's going to need another yellow. So we're going to heat set that at 130 degrees Celsius for 8 minutes, and then I will come back with the next stage.